Okay, hi everybody. So my name is Matt. This is going to be a recap or overview of what happened at the BDA Intro to Python workshop this past Tuesday. So I was trying to record the workshop, but I accidentally was sharing the wrong screen. So I'm just gonna hopefully make a quick video. The first attempt took like 50 minutes of me just rambling, so I'm going to try to make this a lot shorter. Okay, so what is Python and why learn it? So we talked a little bit about Python being a high-level programming language, about having clear and simple syntax, which makes it very beginner-friendly. There are a lot of libraries that you can use. So there are like math libraries like NumPy. There are more like data science, data analysis oriented libraries like pandas. There are web frameworks like Django. So there are lots of different tools that you can use, and which makes Python a very flexible language. And there are a lot of support and resources. It's one of the most popular programming languages on the planet. And with that comes a lot of resources in terms of, YouTube tutorials and books and, Stack Overflow and just Googling things. So yeah, let's see. So installing Python and Sublime. So you'll want to install Python. You can go to this link at python.org, and we can go over there now. So when you go to python.org, you'll see downloads, and then you can just click this download button. If you're on like Mac or Linux, I believe it should say, it should say for your operating system. And then you can just get whatever is the latest release that they have here. One thing that you'll need to do is you'll see that when you're installing Python, there is an option. It says add Python to path in this like red box. Make sure you click it. And then after you select that, you could just click install now. You don't need to do like a custom installation. You can just do install now. So just adding Python to path will allow you to do things from command prompt, which will be useful for when we get to input-output from a terminal. Another thing that you'll need is some kind of text editor or IDE to code Python in. I definitely recommend Sublime. I like Sublime. I think it looks cool. I think it's nice because it's not overwhelming in terms of like its features and just like the layout. But if there's something else that you prefer, like you prefer, Notepad++ or VS Code or PyCharm or, any of the, many other text editors and IDEs out there, use whatever you're comfortable with. But I will be using Sublime. So, if you want things to look exactly like, how I'm doing it, then I'll be using Sublime. So for installing Sublime, you can go to this link at sublimetext.com, and then you'll see a download button, and then you can just download Sublime. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is code our first bit of Python. So we'll be printing hello world and terminal. So how we can do that is type in Python, and you'll see the Python version number. And if you were able to successfully install Python, or you already have Python installed in your computer, you should see something along these. The version number might be a little bit different, but you should see something like this. And then these arrows, and then we can, to print something, we can call the print function. So how the print function works is, and how all function calls work are, you put the name of the function. So in this case, it's print, and then open and closing parentheses. And then within the parentheses, within quotes, we can say hello world. So you can see print hello world, we hit enter, and then after hitting enter, hello world. So that's great. Normally when you start off with a new programming language or just starting off programming, printing hello world is, kind of a tradition. So we've done that. Also, as a side note, something that's kind of cool is if you type in import this, you'll see the Zen of Python, which is, I guess I'd describe it as like some like programming principles in general, but also specific to Python. But also just in general. So yeah, in your free time, if you want to take a read through this, feel free. Just going to close out PowerShell. Okay, and something that I recommend is creating a folder for learning Python, someplace on your computer, maybe a desktop or documents or, wherever makes sense to you, but I'd definitely recommend that. Okay, so the first topic that we talked about were variables. So what is a variable? So a variable is a way to store information / reference a value. The part about referencing a value, don't worry too much about it right now. We will come back to it when we mention aliasing at a certain point in, in our conversation about lists, but that won't, I think that won't be in this workshop. That'll be like in the second workshop. So the way that you, just going to have, hopefully you can see, I'm going to try to have, that doesn't actually do anything. Fortunate. Okay, well, hopefully you'll be able to see both the slideshow and Sublime Text open. So I'm just going to create a new file. So you'll see that when you create a new file in Sublime, it starts off as untitled. You'll want to save it as something. So workshop video 2.py, and make sure you save it as a .py file, .py file. That tells Sublime that it's a Python file. So, when you start, for example, when you start typing in print hello world, you'll see that there's syntax highlighting. So like print, because it's a function call, it's in blue. So it's kind of neat. It's helpful, and you'll actually be able to run things because it's a Python file, because you saved it as a Python file and you're typing in Python code. So the way that you declare, actually first, so to run it, you go to Tools and you click Build. You can see that there's a shortcut Control B. After this, I'm going to be using Control B. So if you see like things running, that's how I'm doing it. I'm just hitting Control B on my keyboard. So we can build it, and then you'll see Hello World. So perfect. So something that we can do is we can create a variable that will store Hello World for us. So the way that you do that is you come up with a name for the variable. So I'll call it message. You do equals, so that's the assignment operator. And then on the right side, we can say hello world. And what this does is it takes hello world, which is a string. A string is, it's an array of it's an array collection of characters. But you don't need to worry about that for now. Think of it as like if you want to, type a name or a word or things like that, or a collection of words like a sentence, that's going to be stored in a string. So that's on the right side, and then there's the assignment operator, and then the variable name on the left. So what this does is it takes hello world and it stores it in message. They're under the hood. It's a little bit more complicated, but for now, just think about it that way. Okay, so there are also other variables. There are also other variable types. So there are things like integers. So integers are like mathematical integers, so like -5 or 3. And there's also floats, which are like mathematical real numbers. Sorry, rational numbers. So think of like fractions. So it also includes numbers like -5, but you can also have like -5/2, or 1.5, things like that. Okay, so also something that's important to note is that Python is not statically typed. So unlike other languages, like say Java or C or C++, that some of you might have experience with, which are statically typed, in Python, you don't declare types of variables. So you might notice, you just say message, you don't say like string message like you might in Java. If you want to create an integer, a variable that stores the integer x, you don't say like int x equals 5, you just say x equals 5. So going back to our variable, so now what we can do is we can pass in message into the print function call, and you'll see that it prints out hello world. So that's kind of cool. So next we'll talk about some string methods. So there is title. So what that does is I will put this all into some wacky capitalization. So so just printing out message, you'll see that it prints out with this like kind of whack capitalization. But if you do message and then to call a string method, you'll have the variable name, so message, and then you'll do dot and then title to call the title method. So if we build that, you'll see that it prints it out in title case. So title case just means that the first character is of each word is capitalized. So how you might write out like, somebody's name, where the first letter of the first name and the first letter of the last name are capitalized. There's also lower, which is all lowercase, and then upper, which is all uppercase or like in caps. And like those are useful. So for example, if you're reading in data, let's say we have, this is not Python code, I'll say Python below. But if we have, say, I'm just gonna move some Zoom stuff out of the way. Okay, so if we have Apple, like let's say we're reading in some data, we have Apple and we have Apple and we have Apple. So we want all of these to be apples, but if we just read them in, the variables will have, like if we read them in, these strings have different values, right? Because they're not the same, they're not equal. But if we convert everything to lowercase, then we'll have 3 apples. And then we could say that would be a good way to check. And then maybe we might have some variable that stores how many apples we have. So I'm not really sure where I was going with that example, but the point is that lower is a useful method. Also, there are white space characters. So in a string, if you do like backslash, I think it's backslash n. I think that's, I always forget which one is like / and which one's backslash. Backslash maybe? I think backslash n. But anyway, so this, like this character and then n, so that does a new line. So you'll see that now it prints it on a new line. There's like this empty line over here. There's also \t, and that stands for tab. So /n is for new line, /t is for tab. So you'll see that there's this tab. So /n/t means, new line and then tab. So the reason why, one reason why I bring it up is because, well, for one thing, if you want to format your output, you're printing some stuff out and you want some stuff to be like on a new line or tabbed in or things like that, you can use it. But also, there are some other string methods to strip white space, like new lines and tabs. So there is lstrip, which gets rid of white space to the left of the string. There's rstrip, which is like, say we have a tab at the end, gets rid of that tab at the end. And then there's strip, which gets rid of white space both to the left and to the right of the string. Also, another thing to point out are that, so say we have, okay, so say we have a message that's hello. So we can concatenate that. So we can say message, let's say we can print message plus, and we can concatenate it with another string. So that means like adding the two strings together. So we can do this. So we can print out hello world that way. But if we tried to, let's say we have a variable x and it has the value 5. If we tried to concatenate that, we would get an error. And the error says can only concatenate string, not into string. So one way around that is we can, there's a function called str, which will turn x into a string. Oh, whoops, I'm missing a parentheses. Okay, so you can see hello 5. So we've added 5 to the end of hello. That's what this concatenation does. And then this str function call takes this x, which is an integer. It's an integer number, and then it turns it into a string. So you can actually concatenate them. Another thing that you can do is you can use f strings or formatted strings. So the way that you do that is you do f, and then you have open and closing quotes, and then you'll see that this f turns into like a squiggly f. So what you could do is then you use braces, and inside of the braces you can put a variable, and then it will deal with any turning integer into a string and things like that. It'll deal with all that for you. So and then we can do x, and then what this is going to do is it's going to take message, and then it's going to get the value of message, and then turn it into a string. There's going to be this space, and then it's going to get x, the value of x, and turn that into a string. So we're going to see hello space 5. So as you can see, there's hello space 5. And then also, I mean, instead of like having a variable message, we could also say hello world number is, and then they'll say hello world number is 5. So this way, using f strings, you don't have to worry about like what type x is. You can, and you don't have to worry about calling str. You can just do it this way. So another thing to mention is that there is, let's see. So there is integer arithmetic, and there is float arithmetic. So integers are like x equals 5. Floats are like x equals 5.0. So if you see like decimals, or you could have like 0.5. So just printing it out, we get 0.5. There are different arithmetic operations. So there is like addition, there is subtraction, there's multiplication, there's division. So one thing to note is that you'll see that when you have one thing that's a float and then another thing that is an integer, it's going to turn into float operations. So 0.5 plus 1 is 1.5, whereas if you have 1 plus 1, it's 2. It's not like 2.0. Normally you might not need to like worry about it that much, but one thing to keep in mind is that there is a difference between integer division and float division. So so I'll do float division first, because that's how you might be used to division of, say, if you do 5 divided by 2, right? It's 2.5, and with float division, even if both of them are integers, it'll default to float division. So how you might normally expect division to work. But if you do 2 slashes instead of 1, it will do integer division. So how integer division works is think of it as like if the answer is not an integer, it's going to round down. So like 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. Because 2.5 isn't an integer, it's going to round down to 2. So 6 divided by 2 using integer division will give you, what you might expect of 3. But 7 divided by 2 integer division will also be 3. Okay, and then something else is that using comments in your code is a good idea. So comments are text that you can put into your code, but it doesn't actually alter the program. Like, it isn't code that's run. So the interpreter ignores it. If you're in another programming language, like the compiler ignores it. So we can say this is a comment, and then print 5, and then you'll see it just prints 5. It doesn't, it doesn't deal with this, but comments are very useful when comments are a good idea to like document your code, to explain what you're doing, and it's a very good practice to comment your code. So if somebody else comes over and is like, hey, what does this mean? They can, see a comment, they can understand it. You can understand it, maybe you write some code and then you come back, like a couple weeks later to look at it and you're like, I have no idea what this means. Comments can help you understand it. So there is an activity, create a variable to store your age and print a message to yourself with your age and your name and title case. I'm going to just go ahead and show the solution, but I would recommend that you pause the video, try it on your own, and then come back to the video. And then if you're not able to figure it out, we're about to go over the solution, or one way to do it. Okay, so create a variable to store your age. So I'm 20 and I feel old now. So I'm going to store that in a variable called age. And then I'm going to print a message to myself with my age and my name and title case. So I'm going to say that I'm so my name is Matt and I'm 20 years old. So you'll notice that I used str because if we just did age, there would be a problem. You could also use an f string here, a formatted string of doing Matt and I am age. So, and that's how you can do it with a formatted string. Okay. So the next topic are lists. So lists are a collection of things with element access. If you're familiar with, it's a dynamic array. So if you're familiar with, like, say, array list in Java, it's very similar. One thing to note is that the index of the list starts at 0, so the first element is at index 0. We'll see how that works in a second. So lists. So the way that you create a list is, so just like with variables, you come up with a name for it. So we can create a list called animals. And then to create a list, you do open and closing square brackets. And then we can put some initial values in the list. So we might have cats, we might have dogs, and we might have goats. So we have a list called animals, and then in the list we have three things, three items. So we have cats, we have dogs, and we have goats. Cats is at element 0, dogs is at element 1, and goats is at element 2. So remember, the index starts at 0, not at 1. So that's why this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So we can access and modify elements. So we can print animals, and we can print the first item in animals. So the way that we do that is we do animals, so the name of the list, and then square brackets, and then in the square brackets, you can put in an index. So remember, 0 is the index of the first item. So you'll see that that prints out cats. So if we change it to 1, it'll print out dogs. We print out, if we change it to 2, it'll print out goats. And then if we print out 3, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, so index error, list index out of range. So one thing to keep in mind is because the index starts at 0, so even though there are 3 items, the last index is actually the length of the list minus 1. So there are 3 items, so the last index is 2 instead of 3. Okay, so we can also modify elements. So I'll just, you can put the name of the list and then it'll print out the items in the list. What we can do is similar to accessing elements by index, we can also modify elements by index. So we can change, let's change the first item. So that would be animals and then square bracket 0. And then we can change it from cats to something else, sheep. So now you'll see that the first item is sheep, but then dogs and goats are the same. So we just changed the first element in the list. Okay, so we can also add things to a list. So there's different ways that we can add things to a list. One is to use append. So as you can see in the slideshow, there are 2 ways, or 2 ways to add to a list. One is using append and the other is using insert. Okay, so first we'll use append. So we can do animals.append. So, similar to how we did string methods, we can, we put the name of the variable here. We put the name of the list here, so animals, and then we do dot, and then we do the name of the method. So it's called append, and then we need to put a value. So we can do sheep again. But the difference is that instead of changing one of our current elements, we're adding it. And append adds it to the end, which is why I can actually, so this first print statement of animals is going to be before the append. And then this second one is after append. So you can see cats, dogs, and goats are still there and they're still in the same order. But then sheep has been added to the end. Okay, what we can also do is animals.insert. So insert takes 2 arguments. So arguments or parameters are the things that you put inside of the parentheses when you do a when you call a method or a function. So all of these, everything that you can see that's in blue, that's a method or a function. So that's some code that there's a name for it. It has specific arguments. And then that code does something. So for example, inserting, it inserts something, appends, it appends something. And later on in the second workshop, we'll actually talk about how to create our own functions. But going back to insert, so the first argument is an index and the second is a value. So to add something to the beginning of the list, we can do 0 for the index because that's going to be at the first position. And then we can add sheep again. So now you can see that sheep has been added to the list, but it's in the first position or at the 0 index, and then cats, dogs, and goats are all like one index further than they were before. We can also remove things from a list. So there's different ways that we can do that. One way is del. And then the way that we do that is you type in del or del, delete, and then animals and then index. So if we delete the first item in animals, we're going to have dogs and goats afterwards because we've removed cats. There's also pop. So we can do animals.pop. And pop, there are different, there's a different set of arguments for pop. So one is, one takes no arguments and it just takes off the last element in the list and actually returns it. So what this does is animals.pop. So this takes off the last element in the list. So in this case, it would be goats because goats is the last element in animals, and then it returns it. So what that means is, as you can see by this assignment operator, it assigns that value to returned. So returned is now going to store the thing that was returned by animals.pop. So returned is going to store goats. And then we can even do return to show that. So now you see, so it used to be cats, dogs, goats. Then after the call, it's cats and dogs. So goats got removed, and we can see that the value returned by animals.pop was goats. You can also do animals.pop with a specific index. So if instead of wanting to get the last element, we wanted to get cats, we could do 0. And then you can see cats got removed, so it's dogs, goats, and then returned cats. So pop is helpful because sometimes you want to actually know what you're removing instead of just saying, delete the first thing in the list. This way, you're taking it out of the list, but you also know what you just took out of the list. So there's also remove. So we can also do animals.remove. And so remove, instead of taking in an index, it actually takes in a value. So if we want to remove goats, for example, we can do animals.remove and then goats inside the parentheses. And then you'll see that we removed goats. So now it's just cats and dogs. Okay, so there's also sorting. So sorting is taking the elements. So it takes the list, so animals in this case, and then it arranges them in alphabetical order, increasing alphabetical order. So if we do animals.sort, you'll see that, okay, unfortunately, it's already in sorted order. So instead, let's do goats, cats, dogs. Okay, so it used to be, so initially it's goats, cats, and dogs, but then after we call sort, it's cats, dogs, goats. So C comes before D, and then D comes before G, so it's in sorted order. What we can also do is instead of, so sort like permanently sorts the list, so animals is sorted. What we could also do is we could print out sorted animals and sorted, so this is different than sort. So sorted, what it does is you can see it in sorted order, but it doesn't actually change. It doesn't actually change this list. So as you can see, so first we print it out in sorted order. So you have cats, dogs, goats, but then after the call to sorted, after the sorted function call, you can see that it's that the animals itself is still goats, cats, and dogs. So sorted, so you can see it in sorted order, but it doesn't actually change animals. So right afterwards, animals is, just as it was before. Also, there some other functions that are useful to know are length. So the length function is len. And then so you do len and then parentheses and then the name of the list. And then that's going to print out 3 because there are 3 items in animals. There is also, let's see. Okay, so we can also do animals.reverse. And you'll see that after calling reverse, the list is now dogs, cats, and goats. One thing that's important to note is that this is not the same thing as sorting. So reverse just takes the original order and then reverses it. So it used to be goats, cats, dogs. Now it's dogs, cats, goats, as you can see. That's different than sorting. So if we sorted it, it would be cats, dogs, goats. So now the activity is going to be to create a list of 5 friends that you'd want to go to Cedar Point with, then add some friends because you got extra tickets, remove someone that got sick, print the number of people going, and then sort them alphabetically. So feel free to pause the video and then you can come back and then we will go over one way to do it. Okay. So the first task is going to be to create a list of 5 friends that you'd want to go to Cedar Point with. So I'm going to create a list called friends. And then remember to create a list, we have square brackets. Also, something to note is that you don't need to have initial values in the list. It could start off as an empty list, and then later on, then you add stuff to the list. But we're going to have like an initial group of friends. So I'm just going to come up with some names. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, cool. So that's 5 people. And then it says add some friends because you got extra tickets. So, extra tickets, that's always great. So remember that there's different ways that we can add people to the list. I'll use append here. So I'll add 1 person, and then I guess it says add some friends. So in the spirit of what I wrote down, I'll add multiple friends, and then remove someone that got sick. So unfortunately, somebody got sick. So remember that there's different ways that we can remove an item from a list. I'm going to use the remove method because I'm thinking somebody specific got sick. So we'd want to remove a value. We'd want to remove like based off of value rather than by index. So let's say David. So fortunately he got sick. So he's been removed from the list, and then print the number of people going. So remember the number of people going means get the length of the list. So the way that we do that is we can do length and then friends. So there's 6, which makes sense because we started off with 5, we added 2, and then 1 person got sick, and then sort them alphabetically. So we can do friends.sort, and then that's going to sort friends. And then if we print friends, you'll notice that these names are in alphabetical order. So A, B, C, 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 D. That's a lot of C's. One thing to note is that so with this ordering, so the first letter is C for all of these, and then it'll look at the next letter. So H comes before O, and then over here you have 2 COs. So then it'll look at the next letter, and then L comes before U. So that's where that ordering comes from. So, and then one thing that I should note about this workshop is that it's adapted from information in the Python Crash Course book by Eric Mathis. At the very end of the workshop, or I guess like series of Python workshops, I'll go over some resources, including Python Crash Course and O'Reilly, which is where you can read it for free as an OSU student. So thank you to everybody that showed up to the Tuesday meeting. It was awesome to see such a great turnout. Hopefully we should have a, I guess like a second part to the Intro to Python workshop coming up pretty soon. So, you know, it would be awesome if, you know, as many people, if not more, as many, if not more people came as to the, like during the Tuesday meeting. So yeah, you know, if you know somebody that, you know, might be interested in learning Python, you know, feel free to show them this video. It goes over everything that we talked about on Tuesday, so it's not like you would have missed anything. And yeah, have a great day. It's Saturday, so I gotta say, go Bucks.